Betrayer. In truth, it was I who was betrayed. Still I am hunted. Still I am hated. Now my blind eyes see what others cannot. That sometimes the hand of fate must be forced. Of doom upon all those who would oppose us.
In June of 2003, a year following the release of Reign of Chaos, Blizzard would release the expansion titled The Frozen Throne. The expansion offered an additional 4 acts to the game, picking up after the events of Mount Azjol, and focusing more heavily on Arthas and Illidan as well as the characters around them. Each of the 4 races would be given additional units, buildings, and heroes, several neutral heroes were introduced, and naval combat was brought back from Warcraft 2. The Frozen Throne would also introduce new races to the Warcraft series, such as the Naga and the Draenei, and expanded upon the map editor in a myriad of ways, which would be shown off using the Orc campaign. Overall, the expansion serves as the finale to Warcraft's RTS saga, and paved the way for not only the World of Warcraft, but set the stage for many of the expansions and storylines that came for years to come. Although the Legion was defeated, dark and twisted creatures still lurk in the shadows. One such dangerous creature is the monster known as Illidan Stormrage, and his former jailer, Maiev Shadowsong, along with her second-in-command Naisha, leads what remains of her wardens to try and hunt him down. Following his trail, it seems to split off in multiple directions, so Maiev divides her forces to search the woods. Traces of the Legion's influence can still be felt in the enraged furbolgs and a crazed wildkin, but demons aren't the only thing stalking the shores. Maiev and her forces encounter a strange serpentine race calling themselves the Naga, who are attempting to burn down a number of ships. Realizing they are aiding Illidan, Maiev directs her forces to the port of Nendis, where Illidan has already set sail. His Naga remain behind to burn the ships, but Maiev butchers them before they can all be destroyed. The Wardens would follow Illidan wherever he chose to flee, and no sea would keep Maiev from her prey. The Wardens would follow Illidan east, but the lands they arrive upon are not on any of their maps. Yet the ruins seem somewhat familiar, and Maiev recognizes the location as the ancient city of Theramore, which sunk below the waves during the War of the Ancients. Now they have been raised from the depths, and would not take long to figure out how. A lone orc resides nearby, introducing himself as Drakthul of the Stormreaver clan. He is the last of his clan and offers to tell his tale if Maiev silences the restless ghosts that haunt him. Just across the water, the spirits of the Twilight's Hammer, Blackrock, and Stormreaver clans battle one another, until Maiev puts them to rest. True to his word, Drakthul tells of how these broken isles came to be. Decades ago, the warlock Gul'dan raised the tomb of Sargeras from the sea floor, where the remains of the Dark Titan's avatar were buried. For his pride, him and the rest of their clan were torn apart by demons, and the broken isles have remained ever since. Exploring the nearby ruins, the immediate region seems to be largely uninhabited, with only bands of murlocs and a few sea giants to call it home. But perhaps further in, they will find the betrayer. The Broken Isles are still partially underwater, and after finding a number of ships nearby, Maiev continues to chase after Illidan. The waters are crawling with Naga, making navigation much more difficult. To the north, however, a large Naga encampment has been established, and after dismantling it, Maiev picks up the trail once again, following it to a great and decrepit temple. This crumbling ruin is the tomb of Sargeras, and Maiev watches silently as Illidan blows apart the doors and enters the tomb. The Naga remain behind to guard the entrance, and Maiev would spring a surprise attack, catching the serpents off guard. With the guards cleared away, the path to the tomb lies open, and Illidan would be trapped inside. Inside the tomb is quiet, and Naisha questions whether they are walking into a trap. Still, they must press on, and early on in their search they come across orcish runes written into the walls. When Gul'dan opened the tomb, he documented his journey through its depths. Gul'dan was seeking a power deep within the tomb, within the Chamber of the Eye. He would send his warlocks to scout through the tomb, whose skeletons Maiev and her wardens now must cut their way through. Blindly, Gul'dan led them to their deaths, and their undead spirits hunger for vengeance. More glyphs further in reveal that Gul'dan's minions did not get far, torn apart by demons, and that Gul'dan himself journeyed through most of the tomb alone. The echoing laughter of Sargeras taunted him throughout his journey, and Naisha and Maiev consider what the mysterious eye could be. Just outside of the chamber is Gul'dan's final journal. He had been ambushed by the tomb's guardians, and at the doorway to his prize, Gul'dan would take his final breaths. Gul'dan's writings aren't the only unsettling discovery to be found. The Wardens come across a statue of Queen Azjara, who betrayed the Night Elf Empire to the Legion. But disturbingly enough, the statue bears a long serpentine tail, leaving her looking much more like the Naga than any Night Elf. Illidan's Naga also block the path, led by one named Lady Vash. She informs Maiev that their two races have more in common than Maiev suspects, as the Naga were once Night Elves. During the War of the Ancients, the Highborn loyal to Queen Azjara sequestered themselves away in their capital of Nazjatar. When the Sacred Well of Eternity exploded, splitting the continents, Nazjatar sunk below the waves, taking the Highborn with it. Under the waves, they were cursed, twisting their forms into the hideous Naga. For the last 10,000 years, they have been waiting to reclaim the surface, and with Illidan's help, they shall. Enraged, Maiev would cut down the Naga in the tomb, but Vash herself would slip out from her grasp. Strange murmuring behind a door betrays Illidan's presence, and upon breaking it down, Maiev confronts him, accompanied by Lady Vash. When Illidan drank in Gul'dan's power, he gained the warlock's memories, including those of the tomb of Sargeras. The power Gul'dan truly coveted lies deeper within, but the Eye of Sargeras is all Illidan needs from this cursed place. Using the Eye's power, Illidan begins to collapse the chamber, intending on sealing Maiev beneath the earth as she did to him for 10,000 years. Without any other choice, Maiev blinks through the rocks, leaving behind Naisha and her fellow wardens. The tomb's inhabitants have awoken from the shaking, and Maiev nimbly dodges through them as she flees from the tomb. Sections of the tomb would collapse, threatening to seal Maiev within, but she would escape from the ruins, and with haste make her way back to her encampment. When Maiev returns to her base, she finds they are surrounded by the Naga. Their own force is too large to attempt to escape stealthily, so their only hope is to send out a runner to contact Malfurion and request reinforcements. The runner will need protection, and when Maiev and a small force move to follow her, the path behind them is sealed. The Naga and Murlocs have been excavating the nearby area, and a few of the artifacts they have unearthed prove rather useful. A special orb allows Maiev to quickly teleport between her base and the escort, allowing her to back up both groups. As her base defends itself from the Naga, the escort moves through the shallow waters, finding a few abandoned ships to carry them forwards. The Naga have blocked the waters leading out to sea, and so on foot, Maiev and the escort break down the barricades and clear out any other hostile forces, allowing the runner to make it to sea. With luck, she will reach Malfurion Stormrage and bring back their desperately needed reinforcements. Back in Kalimdor, Malfurion and Tyrande look over the forests of Mount Hyjal. Although the great tree's roots are healing, the nearby forests of Fellwood are still tainted by the Legion's corruption. As the two of them discuss how best to handle the situation, Maiev's runner arrives, escorted by one of the druids. Although Malfurion is furious at the mention of Illidan, the runner informs him and Tyrande that Maiev pledged herself to recapturing him, but that Illidan has claimed a dark and demonic power from the tomb of Sargeras. Now, Maiev's forces are holding him back on the Broken Isles, but they require immediate reinforcements. Tyrande offers to lead the Sentinels to the Broken Isles, stating that since she was the one who released Illidan, he is her responsibility to deal with. Malfurion initially attempts to dismiss her, claiming him and the druids can handle the situation, but instead decides the two of them should go together. If the situation is as dire as the runner suggests, Maiev will need all the help she can get. Although Malfurion and Tyrande safely arrive at the Broken Isles, not all of their forces arrive together. Some of them have run aground around the island, but there isn't enough time to find them. Maiev's base is under a constant barrage of attacks by the Naga, and if they cannot reach her soon, her base will be quickly overwhelmed. Tyrande and Malfurion quickly navigate their way through the area, encountering the strange serpentine Naga, and fending off the hostile wildlife. Standing between them and Maiev is a large Naga base, and although their meager forces were outnumbered, Malfurion and Tyrande would break through them. Maiev is relieved to see Malfurion, but shows hostility to Tyrande. It was the High Priestess that released Illidan in the first place and killed her wardens guarding him. Malfurion steps between the two, breaking up the argument. They can put aside their conflict until after Illidan has been captured. Illidan is still somewhere on the island, hiding among his Naga. Rounding up the remaining ships, Malfurion rescues the special allies from Ashenvale he brought over. The mountain giants were awoken when the Legion returned, and now they've agreed to aid the Night Elves. As they assault Illidan's base, Tyrande runs into the betrayer. She states it was a mistake to set him free, and his pursuit of raw power over true wisdom is why she chose to be with Malfurion over him. Illidan claims she is blind to what he is doing, and that they share a common enemy. As he runs off, Tyrande chases after him. As she corners him, she is captured by the Naga. Illidan steps out from the shadows, but before he can intervene, Malfurion and Maiev arrive, having finished dismantling the base. Illidan flees as Malfurion and Maiev deal with his guards, but by the time they reach the shore, Illidan has already escaped. Maiev, Malfurion, and Tyrande arrive at the shores of Lordaeron. The land itself has suffered terribly from the effects of the Scourge, and Malfurion leaves to go and commune with the forests, reminding Tyrande and Maiev to focus on their mission instead of their personal disagreements. Moving inland, the two of them come across a band of High Elves led by their prince, Kael'thas Sunstrider. Although Kael'thas hasn't seen any demons around, something has been riling up the undead, making the journey of his caravan much more dangerous. Maiev and Tyrande agree to help escort the caravan, on the condition Kael'thas agrees to help them hunt down Illidan in return. Maiev is reluctant to aid them, but Tyrande reminds her that the Alliance helped them fight off the Legion, and so this is the least they can do. The caravan leaves their post and heads down the road towards the river Aravas, watching carefully for the undead that haunt the lands of Silverpine Forest. The elven caravan holds what meager forces Kael'thas could get together, and along the journey he tells Maiev and Tyrande that the Scourge nearly wiped out his race. His once proud people have renamed themselves to the Sin'dorei, or Blood Elves, in honor of their fallen brethren. The undead harass the caravan every step of the way, and the combined elven forces hire the assistance of mercenaries to bolster their numbers. A split in the road slows them down, forcing them to choose between a longer route or a shorter one that takes them near a Scourge base, but down either path lies Pyrewood Village. The village turns out to be a trap, as the undead burst out of the nearby houses and attack the caravan. As they retreat over the river, Tyrande holds off the undead, but the bridge collapses and pulls her downriver towards the heart of Undead Lands. Maiev convinces Kael'thas not to stage a rescue mission, instead holding him to his agreement to help her find Illidan. Lordaeron has suffered just as much as the forests of Ashenvale, if not more. The blight over the area has killed countless acres of woodland, and the land cries out in pain. As Malfurion communes with the land, he feels a crippling pain course through his body, and he calls out for the spirits of the wilds to show him what this pain is. Wisps appear from the trees and surround Malfurion, granting him a vision of the frozen roof of the world. Northrend is splitting asunder, and the world cries out in pain. Malfurion pleads with the spirits to show him the cause of this destruction, and the scene shifts to an image of Dalaran. There, Illidan's forces are channeling their energies into the Eye of Sargeras. Soon, the enemies of Illidan's new master will be swept away, and he will claim his reward. Furious, Malfurion hurries off to find Maiev and Tyrande to warn them of Illidan's plans. Malfurion finds Maiev and her forces, but Tyrande's absence gives him pause. According to Maiev, she fell during their escort of the Blood Elves, torn apart by the undead before their very eyes. Malfurion is racked with grief, but Maiev channels his sorrow towards hunting Illidan. Illidan is the reason they are here, and it is his fault Tyrande is now dead. She introduces Malfurion to Kael'thas, who has agreed to help them capture the betrayer. They have set themselves up just across a river from the ruins of Dalaran, where the Naga have firmly established themselves, and are conducting the ritual. Their forces are pressed to move quickly before Illidan finishes his destruction of Northrend. The combined elven forces march into Dalaran, laying waste to the Naga within. The sea witches performing the ritual itself are shielded by an ethereal magic, but the fairy dragons turn the magic back upon them, putting an end to their vile schemes. As the Eye of Sargeras breaks apart in the aftermath of the spell's failure, Maiev, Malfurion, and Kael'thas confront Illidan. For endangering the balance of the world, imprisonment will not suffice this time, and Malfurion sentences him to death. Maiev gleefully offers to carry out the sentence herself. Illidan cries out that the spell was meant to destroy the Lich King and put an end to the Scourge threat. Their enemies are one and the same, but Malfurion asks at what cost, and spits back that because of him, Tyrande is dead. Confused, Kael'thas steps in that Tyrande may not be dead and may just be somewhere downriver. Malfurion turns his ire towards Maiev, furious that she lied to him. Illidan offers to help find her, as no matter their differences, he would never wish for her to come to harm. Maiev protests that they could never side with the betrayer, but Malfurion encases her in magical vines to hold her in place. He would deal with her once Tyrande was safe, and the two brothers followed Kael'thas to the river. Illidan's Naga scouted the river and found where her and her forces defend themselves against the undead. Malfurion moves to go rescue her, but Illidan offers his Naga instead. It would be faster to travel down the river directly, and the Scourge's aerial forces prevent approaching from the skies. Although Malfurion risks much by trusting Illidan, he believes his brother truly wishes for Tyrande's safety. Illidan and his Naga break down a nearby troll dam and assault the Scourge base from behind, burning it to the ground. Rushing to Tyrande ahead of the roaming undead, Illidan opens a portal for the two of them to escape through. At first, Tyrande accuses Illidan of setting a trap to finish her off, but Illidan convinces her to step through the portal to safety. Reunited with Malfurion, Tyrande thanks Illidan, and he confesses that for all the strife between the two brothers, and the years of hatred Illidan felt in his heart for Malfurion, he has grown tired of their conflict. From that day forward, there would be peace between them. The suffering Illidan brought to the world cannot be forgiven, but for saving Tyrande, Malfurion will let him walk away. Illidan never sought to rule the world, but instead he only ever desired power. By siding with Malfurion, Illidan has angered his new master, and so he takes his leave through an open portal. He bids farewell to Tyrande, telling her that the two of them will never see each other again. As he vanishes through the portal, Maiev arrives, chastising Malfurion and Tyrande for letting Illidan escape. Tyrande's pleas fall on deaf ears, and Maiev and her wardens run through the portal to lands unknown, and Malfurion eases Tyrande's mind. Maiev has lost herself to the hunt, and they can only pray she does not cause more harm than Illidan. As the portal closes, Malfurion and Tyrande turn away to head back home. It has been a long year since the Legion first arrived in Kalimdor, and the two of them have earned their rest. On the outskirts of Dalaran, Kael'thas and the Blood Elves arrive at the encampment of Lord Garithos. Although the prince attempts to explain why he and his forces are late, Garithos dismisses his wild stories and turns his attention to the mission at hand. A large Scourge force is approaching Dalaran from the south, while a smaller detachment has set themselves up in the eastern mountains. Garithos will be leading the soldiers south to fight against the undead, and while Kael is ready to mobilize his forces to fight alongside them, Garithos has other plans in mind for the Blood Elves. 3 observatories lay nearby, and Garithos ordered Kael'thas to remain behind and repair the observatories, keeping an eye on the Scourge to the east. Brushing aside Kael's protests, Garithos reminds him that the elves serve the Alliance, which means they follow his orders down to the letter. As humiliating a task as it might be, Kael's warriors are forced to repair the observatory and fight their way through the ruins of Dalaran, clearing out the mad wizards, crumbling golems, and remaining Legion forces that have claimed the fallen city. Arriving at the shores of the nearby lake, the undead have already burned down the shipyards, preventing passage to the other observatories. As Kael curses the situation, Lady Vashj emerges from the waters, greeting the young prince. Her and her Naga have come in peace, bringing along a few transport ships as a gesture of goodwill. Their kind shares a common ancestry, and now both share an enemy against the Scourge. Kael accepts the ships and establishes himself on the nearby island, repairing the observatory station there. The final observatory lies on the other side of the lake to the north, and once it has been repaired, him and his forces monitor the situation to the east. Lord Garithos arrives at their base, unhappy with Kael'thas. He had received disturbing news the Blood Elves accepted help from the Naga, and despite Kael reassuring him that the Naga are not a threat, Garithos asserts that they are inhuman and must be crushed. Warning Kael'thas to watch where his loyalties lie, he leads his men back down to the south. An emissary from Garithos brings new orders to Kael. The undead are amassing nearby, and Garithos has ordered the Blood Elves to wipe them out. At the same time, he has ordered all foot soldiers, cavalry, and support teams down to the south, leaving Kael'thas with few forces remaining. As the emissary leaves, he snidely tells Kael that Garithos has confidence in the elves' creativity to deal with the undead. Without any supporting forces, the undead attack the outlying bases, wiping them out one after another. Soon, all that remains is the central base positioned on the island, leaving the elves completely surrounded by the undead. Lady Vashj and her Naga emerge from the waters, pledging themselves to fight alongside Kael against the undead. Kael initially tries to send Vashj away, not wanting to risk Garithos' ire any further, but Vashj points out that Garithos isn't here fighting the undead with him. Reluctantly, and with little other options, Kael'thas accepts Vashj's offer for aid. The first order of business would be to gain a foothold on the mainland, and with Vashj's help, Kael manages to destroy one of the Scourge bases and establish an encampment. From there, Kael and Vashj would push their way towards the heart of the undead base, and burning it to the ground. With the battle won, Kael confides in Vashj that he may have doomed his people accepting their help. Vashj comments that Garithos trusts no race other than his own, and that perhaps it is time to separate his people from the Alliance. Kael mentions a festering hunger that has begun to claim his people, and to his horror, Vashj informs him that, just like her people, the Blood Elves are addicted to magic. Without the Sunwell to feed them, they will be consumed by their hunger unless they find a new source. Their conversation is cut short by the arrival of Garithos. As the Naga flee, they are spotted by Garithos, who decides to instead confront the Blood Elves. He never believed they should have been allowed to join the Alliance, and now that he has caught them siding with monsters, he has the perfect excuse he needs to execute every last one of them. The Dalaran sewers have been converted into dungeons, and the cells once used to keep the Kirin Tor's experiments from getting loose are perfect for keeping the Blood Elves imprisoned. Left to rot in there, the elves would succumb to their addiction, were it not that they were set to be executed the following morning. As Kael considers his fate, he is released by Lady Vashj. The portal Kel'Thuzad once opened still lies in the city above, and if Kael and Vashj can rescue the other Blood Elves, they can escape to the other side, where Illidan awaits them. They seek out Kael's lieutenants as they work on freeing others imprisoned, while Kael fights through Garithos' guards towards the exit, and lays to rest the ghosts of the slain Archmagi still haunting the city. The guards would release some of the more aggressive experiments still caged down in the sewers in an attempt to slow them down, but Kael and Vashj would continue to make their way to the exit. Jailer Kassan, who once served the Kirin Tor, barred the way, along with teams of soldiers and knights, and once he has been dealt with, Kael begins his preparations to move his people to safety. The portal is opened once more, and the elven engineers who once helped to build Dalaran's defenses set to work in constructing enchanted towers to protect those attempting to flee through it. Garithos would receive word that the elves were attempting to escape and rallied his forces to focus on nothing but the portal's destruction. This mission is a unique one, hidden through a puzzle in the previous mission. Rather than the typical Warcraft gameplay, this mission is set up as a tower defense, and surviving through all 30 waves yields a reward for the next mission, in the form of a Pandaren Brewmaster as an additional controllable hero. Once the last of his citizens has escaped through the portal, Kael calls for his defenders to retreat. As Kael'thas and Vashj stand at the threshold, Vashj promises Kael that the two of them would be taking their final steps towards their destiny. As they slip through the portal, it closes behind them, preventing anyone from following after. On the other side of the portal was a scarred and broken land. The crimson soil was dry and cracked, and large portions of the earth was blown apart, hovering in the air. This desolate waste is all that remains of the orcish homeworld of Draenor, now called Outland by its inhabitants. Many years ago, after the Second War, Ner'zhul stole a number of powerful artifacts and opened numerous portals across the planet. An alliance expedition led by Khadgar chased them through the dark portal into Draenor, where they nearly wiped out the orcs for good, but when Ner'zhul completed his ritual atop the Black Temple, the powerful energies would tear the planet apart. Now, the ruins of the planet drifted through the twisting nether, where the fell energies only fueled the slow corruption of what remained. Somewhere in the wastes, Illidan was waiting for them, and Kael was eager to seek him out. If the demon could find a way to cure his people of their magical addiction, then he would gladly pledge his loyalty to Illidan's service. Even after 3 days of travel, there are no signs of life to be found, but as the wind shifts, Vashj catches a familiar scent. A Night Elf stronghold has been established nearby, and they appear to belong to the Warden Maev's forces. After following Illidan through the portal, Maiev would not stop in her hunt for the betrayer, and at last she has finally captured him. The Wardens are escorting him back to their stronghold, and if they manage to bring him within its walls, then Kael and Vashj will have no chance of rescuing him. They would meet the Night Elves in combat, and after sending Maiev retreating back to her base, the two of them would escort Illidan's cage back to their own base. Maiev would rally more troops to her side, striking out again and again to try and retake Illidan, but the combined forces of the Blood Elves and Naga kept her at bay. When at last Illidan is safe within their own base, Vashj frees him and introduces him to Kael'thas Sunstrider. The Blood Elves are the last mortal descendants of the Highborn that served Illidan before the War of the Ancients, who sailed to the Eastern Kingdoms to found their own great civilization. Kael'thas tells of his people's plight to Illidan, who shares the young prince's curse. He too feels a hunger for magic, but regretfully he informs Kael there is no cure for their addiction. There are, however, ways to feed it, and if the Blood Elves stay by his side, then Illidan promises them more power to feast upon than they could possibly imagine. Illidan makes Kael his right hand alongside Lady Vashj, and the three of them begin planning their next steps. Months after the Legion's defeat, Illidan was visited by the great demon lord Kil'jaeden within Ashenvale Forest. By consuming the powers of the Skull of Gul'dan and slaying Tichondrius, he ensured the Legion's defeat at the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Now, Kil'jaeden offers him a second chance. The Lich King has broken free of the Legion, and if Illidan can succeed in destroying Ner'zhul, still trapped in the ice of Northrend, Kil'jaeden will grant his heart's desire. His first attempt using the Eye of Sargeras failed, and so he fled to Outland to hide from Kil'jaeden. Now, if they wish to remain, Kil'jaeden's agents must be cleansed from the land. After Draenor was destroyed, the Pit Lord Magtheridon rallied the remaining orcs and seized control of Outland. By using the portals Ner'zhul once opened, his demonic hordes have grown stronger. Illidan intends on closing them himself to cut off Magtheridon's reinforcements before moving on to the Black Citadel. The orcs would attempt to destroy Illidan's base, along with a village not far to the south. The alien race of the Draenei still calls Outland home, even after most of them were driven off the planet years ago. The orcs' attempts to drive off the Broken Tongue tribe have proven fruitless, and with Illidan's help, the Draenei push back against the orcs and reclaim the surrounding land. The Elder Sage Akama agrees to fight alongside Illidan and reclaim the Black Citadel, which was once a sacred temple of his people before the orcs nearly drove them to extinction. With the aid of the Draenei, Illidan, Vashj, and Kael cut their way through the demons guarding the various gateways and permanently seal them. Although Magtheridon is cut off from reinforcements, the Black Citadel will still be heavily defended. Magtheridon has grown complacent over the years as he has had no real threats he has needed to deal with. His raw strength and sheer numbers will be no match for Illidan's cunning. As Vashj sneaks her forces in through the sewers, Illidan and Kael'thas break through the main gates with the assistance of Akama. The most powerful of the temple's defenses are powered by special crystals, but Akama's people can walk undetected in the shadows, allowing them to slip by and disable them. With each guard that falls, Illidan draws closer to two of Magtheridon's trusted generals. The Master of Pain and Mistress of Torment hold the keys to the temple's summit, where Magtheridon awaits. He would prove no match against Illidan's power, and his combined forces would break Magtheridon into submission. The Pit Lord was a relic of a fallen age, and Illidan shall replace him as the true Lord of Outland. From atop the temple, he addresses all who are in attendance, declaring that his supreme rule cannot be challenged, and now all of Outland would serve him. As Illidan, Vashj, and Kael celebrate their victory, an odd storm approaches the temple. As it draws closer, Vashj warns Kael to keep his head down, as the monstrous form of Kil'jaeden appears before the trio. The demon hunter failed to destroy the frozen throne as commanded, and now he tries to hide from Kil'jaeden's wrath in this barren hellscape. Illidan promises that his plans were merely set back, and that he had come to this world in an attempt to bolster his forces and come up with a new plan. As Kil'jaeden looks over the Naga and the Blood Elves, he decides that perhaps Illidan's new allies do show some amount of potential, and agrees to give Illidan one final chance. As Kil'jaeden leaves, Illidan turns to Vashj and Kael. Hiding on Outland may not have been the wisest decision, but now the quest lies before them. Both Vashj and Kael swear their loyalty to Illidan, agreeing to follow him into the cold heart of death itself. It has been many months since Detheroc, Balnazzar, and Varimathras have heard from Archimonde. They continue to watch over Lordaeron, ready to mobilize at a moment's notice, but the longer they remain in control, the further they run the scourge into the ground. Their thoughts are interrupted by the return of Prince Arthas, who thanks the Dreadlords for taking care of his kingdom, but he no longer requires their services. The three of them flee from the prince, and Kel'Thuzad and Sylvanas welcome Arthas back home. Arthas declares himself as the new king of Lordaeron, and his first act will be to scour the remaining humans from its lands. However, they have begun to abandon their villages and flee into the mountains, where it will be impossible to hunt them all down should they escape. Arthas divides up his forces between himself, Kel'Thuzad, and Sylvanas, and the three of them block the roads and begin their slaughter. The three forces move through the countryside, slaughtering what remains of Lordaeron's living population. They are being defended by the remnants of the Silver Hand, who are positioned nearby, and Arthas calls for their extermination. Midway through their hunt, Arthas is crippled by a searing pain, and the voice of the Lich King speaks to him, warning him of an encroaching danger. Though his powers are diminished, Arthas is insistent that they finish the hunt before they investigate this mystery. The remaining hunters would be slaughtered, and the Silver Hand's haven would be crushed with ease. Yet Arthas would feel the crippling pain again, and this time the Lich King commanded that Arthas return to Northrend immediately. Kel'Thuzad would rush to Arthas' aid, and the new king would lean on the Lich's help and return to the capital to prepare for a long journey ahead of him. The following evening, Sylvanas meets with the three Dreadlords. Free of the Lich King's voice in her head, she was approached by them to discuss the latest developments regarding King Arthas. As it turns out, the Lich King is losing his power, and as it continues to wane, so too does his control over the Scourge. Frostmourne still holds powerful enchantments, but it is only a matter of time until Arthas' powers too will fade. Kel'Thuzad is too loyal to betray Arthas, but with her will now her own, Sylvanas wishes for revenge. She agrees to aid the Dreadlord's coup, but will assist in her own way. Balnazzar remains distrustful of Sylvanas, as her elven heart would never agree to side with them, but Varimathras quells his fears. Sylvanas' hatred for Arthas will be a useful tool for turning her into their pawn, and with the three of them in agreement, they begin to plot their coup. Arthas is having a difficult time even commanding his own warriors, and if he does not reach Northrend soon, all will be lost. All of the preparations have been made, but as Arthas and Kel'Thuzad attempt to leave the city, they are confronted by the Dreadlords. They have assumed control of the majority of the Scourge and spring their trap to kill Arthas. Kel'Thuzad, cut off from his king, urges Arthas to flee into the wilderness, where the two of them will reconvene. Taking control of whatever forces he can, Arthas begins to make his way through the burning streets of the city, fighting against his own Scourge that have been turned against him, and the demonic forces that remain in Lordaeron under the Dreadlord's control. As they leave the city, they find more of the Dreadlord's forces laying in wait, but are rescued by a group of banshees. They have been sent by Sylvanas to escort Arthas across the river to safety, where she will meet with them in the forests. The Banshees lead Arthas into a clearing where another vision from the Lich King warns him that he has been deceived. His forces fall as a poisoned arrow pierces his armor and Sylvanas reveals herself. The paralytic effects were crafted just for him, and now Sylvanas intends to make Arthas suffer just as much as he made her suffer. Her vengeance would be denied with the arrival of Kel'Thuzad, who slays the Banshee escort and drives Sylvanas into the trees. As she flees, she promises that she will never stop hunting him. Kel'Thuzad's forces would bring Arthas to the safety of the shoreline, where the arrow's paralysis would slowly work its way out of his system. The ships for the journey have all been prepared, and Arthas thanks the Lich, confessing that he has been a dear friend. The future is uncertain, and Arthas is not sure he will ever return, and so he asks Kel'Thuzad to watch over his kingdom and ensure his legacy will live on. As Kel'Thuzad makes his promise, Arthas boards the ship and sets sail for Northrend. Only days ago was Sylvanas a slave to the Lich King, but now she and her sisters are free, yet they are still cursed to undeath. Her thoughts are interrupted by the arrival of Varimathras, who has come to invite her into their new order. Sylvanas refuses the offer, unwilling to give up her newfound freedom so easily. Varimathras would retreat to his base and launch a number of assaults against Sylvanas, but she would not prove to be easy prey. Her banshees were capable of possession, and by converting the ogres to the northwest and the bandits to the northeast, Sylvanas grew her own forces and launched an attack on Varimathras. As she confronts the Dreadlord, Varimathras begs for Sylvanas to spare his life. He is aware of Deathrok and Balnazar's plans and where their forces are stationed, and intends to betray them and serve Sylvanas to spare his own life. Intrigued, Sylvanas agrees to let him prove his loyalty, but warns that he will be kept on a very short leash. Arthas set foot on Northrend once again, feeling as though a lifetime had passed since last he had been here. Something was threatening the Lich King, and it would not take long to figure out what it was. Dragonhawk riders would approach Arthas, introducing themselves as the Blood Elves, but would be driven off by a great beetle-like creature. This creature is a Nubarak and was sent by the Lich King to help Arthas reach the Frozen Throne. Together, the two of them destroy the nearby Blood Elf base to make use of their resources, and there, Kael'thas reveals himself. He informs Arthas that this was merely a scouting force, and that Illidan's army is far more vast. Even now, they march upon the glacier, and the Death Knight will never reach his king in time. Anubarak, however, was once the king of the ancient empire of Azjol-Nerub, and knows the underground passageways will grant them a direct passage to the Frozen Throne. A darkness has settled over the tunnels, but it is their only way to reach the glacier before Illidan. Fighting through Vash's Naga, Anubarak leads Arthas up to the gates of the Fallen Kingdom. Varimathras has led Sylvanas straight to Deathrok's base, where a human encampment is established nearby. As it turns out, Lord Garithos had fallen under the spell of Deathrok quite some time ago, and he has been using him and his forces as pawns. Their forces were too great, but by possessing one of the nearby patrols, Sylvanas opened the gates to their base and launched a surprise attack to catch them off guard. It would not be long before they realized what was going on, but by then Sylvanas had already established her base and began to reinforce her warriors. Striking against the humans, while it brought personal satisfaction, was not the primary goal. Instead, Sylvanas' forces were aimed directly at Deathrok. When Deathrok fell, his hold over Garithos was broken and the humans turned against the undead. He turned his blade towards Sylvanas, believing them to be a part of the Scourge, but she convinced him that she was free and her only desire was vengeance. They shared a common enemy in Balnazar, who was currently occupying the capital, and thus Garithos reluctantly agreed to an alliance. Capital City would not fall easily. It had held strong against the Horde years earlier, and now in Balnazar's hands, Varimathras reasons only a battle of attrition will squeeze the Dreadlord out. But Sylvanas opts for a more aggressive strategy. While Garithos assaulted the city from behind, Sylvanas would approach from the front. Between the two of their armies, they would breach through the city's walls and dismantle Balnazar's defenses. The Dreadlord himself would curse Varimathras for siding with Sylvanas, but it had become clear the Legion was on the losing side. As a test of his loyalty, Sylvanas orders Varimathras to kill Balnazar, which Varimathras protests. It is forbidden for a Nathrazim to kill another, but to prove himself, Varimathras carried out the order. Satisfied, Garithos orders them all out of his city, to which Varimathras gleefully ends his life. Capital City and the surrounding lands that were once Lordaeron are now under Sylvanas' control, and free of the Scourge she proclaims that those that follow her shall be known as the Forsaken. As Arthas and Anub'arak approach the entrance to Azjol-Nerub, there are no Nerubians to be found, undead or otherwise. Instead, the two of them are met with Myrddin's dwarves, now led by Baelgun. They claimed the ancient tunnels as their own in order to survive, and despite attempting to seal the doors, the Scourge breaks their way in. Arthas would not make it far, as the dwarves blow up the bridge leading further in, although Anub'arak assures him there are other passageways within the maze-like tunnels. These tunnels hold living Nerubians who remain hostile to the undead, as well as storerooms of gold and treasures. The dwarves attempt to fend off the undead, but their own explosives would be used against them. Finding Baelgun, the dwarf warns them that the recent quakes awoke ancient horrors beneath the ice, which the dwarves have sworn to keep imprisoned. Stripping the blood key off his corpse, Arthas opens the doors to the caverns leading deeper still. Assuming Baelgun's words were true, there is no telling what will await them in the heart of the old Nerubian Empire. Down in the Old Kingdom, more living Nerubians halt their path, calling for the death of the traitor king. Although Arthas is initially confused, Anub'arak corrects his assumption. When the Lich King first arrived in Northrend and created the Scourge war machine, the Nerubians resisted him. Seeing them as a threat, the Nerubians launched an attack against the Lich King and kicked off the War of the Spider. The Nerubians were resistant to the Scourge's plagues and magics, and by utilizing guerrilla tactics, they quickly gained the upper hand. When the Lich King launched a massive invasion against Azjol-Nerub itself, the Nerubians were pushed back into their kingdom. Attempting to tunnel their way out, they unearthed a dark and terrible ancient evil. Fighting a war on two fronts, many of the Nerubians, including the great king Anub'arak, fell and were raised into the Scourge's army. The faceless ones that were awoken still haunt the old passageways, and a twisted, forgotten one lies along the path through the tunnels. As more faceless ones flood into the chamber, Arthas and Anub'arak are forced to flee into the Upper Kingdom. The exit to the Upper Kingdom will bring Arthas and Anub'arak to the base of Icecrown Glacier, but so close to their goal they cannot afford to let down their guards. The way is still lined with hidden traps, but as they attempt to make their way forward, another quake causes the chamber to collapse. Separated from his forces, Arthas is forced to make the rest of the journey alone and hope Anub'arak made it out. Maneuvering through fire and moving platforms, Arthas races against time as the rest of the tunnels threaten to collapse on top of him. More faceless ones lie along the path, slowing him down, but at the far end, across a pool of water, Anub'arak breaks through the rubble and the two are reunited. Anub'arak congratulates Arthas, seeing why the Lich King chose him, as few could have made it through alive. With little time remaining, they rush towards the exit, finding a large group of faceless ones blocking it, led by a larger horror. With no choice, Arthas fights his way through the horde and reaches the safety of the kingdom's exit, welcoming the sunlight once again. Arthas and Anub'arak arrive at the base of the glacier, finding that their forces are already assembled. As they approach, they are welcomed by the necromancers and informed that Illidan's forces have already entrenched themselves around the area. But as Arthas tries to listen, another headache grips him. The Lich King calls out to him, sensing his champion down below. In truth, the reason why their powers are diminishing is the Lich King's energies are leaking out through a fracture in his prison. Frostmourne was once bound within the ice with the Lich King, but Ner'zhul thrust it out and sent it on its journey to find Arthas and guide him to his destiny. To the Lich King. Now, Kil'jaeden's agents close in around him, and if they reach the Frozen Throne before Arthas, then the Scourge will be lost forever. Granting Arthas what remaining power he can spare, the Lich King awaits at the top of the glacier. Looking out across his vast army, Arthas now realizes what must be done and vows to finish this once and for all. The throne's chamber lies at the heart of the frozen valley, its entrance sealed by 4 enchanted obelisks. Around 2 of them, Illidan's forces have established their fortifications, and it would not take long before Illidan, Kael, and Vashj move to claim the other 2. If Arthas hopes to gain access, he will need to activate the 4 of them himself. As Arthas' forces move between the obelisks, they are forced to defend him while the obelisks are activated, and establish defenses of their own to fend off against Illidan's incursions. The 2 would come to blows, fighting against one another for control of the obelisks, with Illidan taunting Arthas that the Scourge will meet its end, and Arthas vowing to put the fear of death back into him. Ultimately, Arthas would claim all 4 obelisks and the door to the chamber would be opened. Still, Illidan bars the way, standing before its gates. Arthas tells Illidan to leave this world and never return, but having sworn to destroy the Frozen Throne, Illidan cannot simply stand aside. Without any other recourse, the 2 of them would be forced to fight against one another one final time. Arthas and Illidan would confront each other in single combat. When last their blades had clashed, all that time ago in Ashenvale Forest, the two of them had been of equal strength. But that encounter was just a distant memory now, and both of them would fight until their last breath. The fight would be tense, with each side never gaining a true upper hand over the other, all while calling upon every power they had accumulated. The decisive blow would be struck by Arthas, managing to get a lucky hit against Illidan and striking a blow across his chest. Rather than finishing the demon hunter off, Arthas turned his attention to the frozen throne, leaving Illidan to bleed out onto the snow. He would be rescued by Vosh and Kael'thas and taken back to the Black Temple to lick his wounds. There, Illidan would build his army and rule over Outland with an iron fist, fearful of the day Kil'jaeden returned. The scar left behind by Frostmourn's sting would never cease its painful bite, and Illidan would remember their encounter until the end of his days. Ascending the stairs up to the frozen throne, the ghosts of the past echo through Arthas' mind. Uther, Muradin, Medivh, and even his own words haunted him, but the loudest voice would whisper to him as he reached the summit. The Lich King called out for Arthas to return the blade and release him from his prison, and with a cry, Arthas struck Frostmourne against the ice. As the Lich King's armor fell to the ground, the surrounding shell of ice falling away, Arthas would pick up the helmet and place it upon his own head. In that instant, his soul would bond with Ner'zhul, and the two of them became one.
To your men and betrayed the mercenaries who fought for you. What's happening to you, Arthas?
Some prince will find only death in the cold. Turn away. Complete circle. Release me from this prison.
For many years, Rexxar has hidden himself away in the wilds, watching as the other races fought between each other. As he watches on, an orc runner is ambushed by a pack of Quillbore, and despite Rexxar's help, Moghrin falls. He had been delivering a letter to his war chief Thrall, and Rexxar honors Moghrin's dying wish to deliver it. Following the demonic invasion of Mount Hyjal, Thrall led the orcs to the rugged coasts and founded the nation of Durotar, named after his father. There, Rexxar finds the orcs constructing their new city of Orgrimmar, named in honor of Thrall's former mentor. Rexxar delivers the message and introduces himself as the last of the clan of Mok Nathal. Back on Draenor, the Mok Nathal were born of half orc and half ogre, and as Orgrimmar was built for all orcs to call home, Thrall offers Rexxar a place within its walls. Rexxar insists he earn his place among them, and Thrall points out there may be some around the city that could use his help. With the aid of his bear Misha and one of Thrall's best scouts, Rokan of the Darkspear, Rexxar begins to explore around the city. The first one that Rexxar finds is the chief engineer, a goblin by the name of Gazlo. His men are digging under the city to look for an underground spring and accidentally dug into a kobold nest. Finding the tunnels, Rexxar assists the goblins with destroying the support beams to collapse the nest on top of the kobolds, though the goblins are blown apart in the process. The shaman Drekthar has been attempting to brew a special potion to aid their warriors in battle, but the required shimmerweed only grows in Thunder Ridge, where the thunder lizards have been growing aggressive as of late. Something has been riling them up, and after retrieving 6 bushels of the herb, Drekthar promises he will go to investigate. Finally, the captain of the security forces, Nazgrel, sends Rexxar to deal with the harpies that have been raiding their supply caravans for a few weeks now. Locating their lair and putting each of them in the ground, Rexxar returns to Nazgrel triumphant. In exchange for his help, Nazgrel sends Rexxar off to the armory to requisition a free piece of gear. To the east of Orgrimmar, Rexxar stumbles upon a dying shaman named Morg Wolfsong, surrounded by the corpses of his slain brethren. They had been attacked by a group of orcs that still worshipped the Burning Legion and ran off with one of the shaman's artifacts. Tracking them down through a canyon full of thorny brambles, Rexxar and Rokan dispatch of the cult and bring the artifact back to Wolfsong. Grateful that the spirits of his fallen brothers have been avenged, the shaman leaves the relic in Rexxar's hands and passes on. Another strange encounter to the north is a Pandaran brewmaster looking to collect ingredients for his masterpiece. Rexxar agrees to help him, collecting a Thunderbloom bulb from the nearby Murloc camp, the egg of a powerful Thunder Phoenix, and purchasing a keg of Thunder Water from a local market. The brew turns out rather terrible in the end, but it leaves the brewmaster, Chen Stormstout, eager to keep searching this land for other ingredients to help refine it. Rexxar readily agrees to let Chen join him and Rokan, and the three of them head back towards Orgrimmar. Nazgrel had reported to Thrall about humans encroaching on their lands, and distrustful of them, he suggests sending a group out to survey the area. Thrall agrees, sending Rexxar to meet with Garthok at the northeastern outpost. Garthok hasn't seen any activity, but does mention a nearby observatory, although the local Quillboar have been growing aggressive and may bar the way. Going through the Beast Den to not only reach the observatory, but also deal with the Quillboar menace, Rexxar fights the Boarmen worshipping the bones of a primitive god. The wild god Agamagon was the progenitor of their race, but the Great Boar was killed 10,000 years ago during the War of the Ancients. It is said where his blood fell, great thorny vines grew wild and untamable, with the Quillboar settling under their shelter as homes. At last, reaching the observatory, Rexxar spies through the telescope at the eastern shores, seeing a large fleet of human ships making landfall. As it turns out, the humans led by Jaina Proudmoore settled just to the south, but now it appeared as though they were making their move on Orcish territory. Drekthar was seen heading to Thunder Ridge to investigate the Thunder Lizards, and so Rexxar's party seeks him out to offer their aid. The Thunder Lizards typically remain within the canyon, but something has been making them aggressive and driving them out. As they begin their investigation, they quickly spot a human lumber mill that has been chopping down the forest in the area. Although Rexxar is ready to tear it down, Drekthar holds him back. After the Battle of Mount Hyjal, Thrall and Jaina agreed to a pact of non-aggression between their two nations, and attacking the mill could lead to open war. The humans would need to be dealt with later, and instead the Thunder Lizards would need to be put down to prevent them from threatening Orgrimmar citizens. Along the way, Drekthar collects a number of their eggs to study their ecology, hoping to find a way to prevent something like this from happening in the future. Cursing the needless waste of life, Rexxar and his companions complete their grim work before turning to more important matters. Regardless of the non-aggression pact, Thrall cannot allow Jaina to move her troops onto his borders and orders Nazgrel to accompany Rexxar's party back to the outpost to monitor the situation. When they arrive, they find the outpost razed to the ground and move to attack the human camp along the coast. Finding their camp, Rexxar notices a strange emblem of an anchor emblazoned on their armor and makes note of it as they burn down their tents and slaughter every last soldier. Thrall is disheartened to hear the news of their presence, although he is puzzled by the emblem they wear, finding it somewhat familiar. Rokan points out that if the humans are approaching by the sea, then his people's village on the Echo Isles could be in danger. Taking a goblin zeppelin, Rexar, Rokan, and Chen make their way to the Echo Isles to meet with the new leader of the Darkspear tribe, Vol'jin, to assess the situation. When they meet with Vol'jin, the Darkspear village is already under attack by the human fleets. The battleships will need to be destroyed before the trolls can begin to evacuate to the mainland, but without any flying mounts, Rexar and his companions will be useless on land. Luckily, Vol'jin transforms the trio into spirit wyverns and lends the aid of his bat riders armed with explosives. Moving between the islands, Rexar destroys the ships attacking the trolls' homes and sends the large battle cruisers to the bottom of the sea. With them cleared, the outer villages will need to be signaled to evacuate, and setting fire to a number of pyres will alert them to head to the mainland. Unfortunately, the island the pyres are located on have become a home for a group of sea giants, which will need to be dealt with. The giants and aquatic fauna prove to be difficult, but with the threat of the remaining human fleets reinforcing their invasion, Rexar presses on and lights the signal pyres. The trolls that manage to escape would regroup just a little ways to the south, where they will be safer under the Horde's protection. Having had enough of this farce, Thrall wishes an audience with Jaina, and luckily an emissary has agreed to meet at Razor Hill that night. Sensing a trap, Rexar offers to go in Thrall's place to meet with the humans. Although Thrall is not one to back down from a fight, he reluctantly agrees to let Rexar and his companions go to the meeting. When they arrive, the emissary is surprised that the war chief himself did not arrive, while Rexar comments that Jaina herself did not come to the meeting. Confused as to why Jaina would be there, the emissary calls to spring their ambush, but Rexar's party would not be caught off guard. Fighting back, they overpower their would-be assassins and attempt to question the emissary, but ultimately get no information out of him. Thrall is in disbelief that Jaina would betray their pact as she has, and attempting to lure him into a trap. Choosing to take a more direct approach, Thrall wishes for Jaina to explain her recent madness. He asks Rexar and his companions to infiltrate her new city on the island of Theramore to the south, providing a zeppelin to transport them to the Darkspear's new village. Rexar, Rokan, and Chen arrive at the new Darkspear village and are greeted by Vol'jin. He warns that Theramore Isle will be difficult to sneak onto as the human fleets are patrolling the waters around the area, but there may be someone that is able to help them. He has already been alerted and is waiting by the dockyard for their arrival. As Rexar's group make their way out from the village, they are attacked by more centaur, and further down the road they find a village burned to the ground with no sign of any survivors. The hoofprints all over the area implied the village was attacked by the centaur, and following the tracks leads them back to their camp. The remaining orcs are being held in cages, and one of them, Mathog, points Rexar in the direction of the centaur's leader, Con Gragtor. Gragtor holds the key to their cages, and after they kill the warlord, they release the captive orcs. With his clan safe, Mathog thanks Rexar and begins to march with his men back to Orgrimmar. Near the humans' shipyard, an orc by the name of Samura waits for Rexar and his group. As a master of stealth, Vol'jin gave him a number of volatile explosives to plant at critical structures around the docks. Once the explosives go off, it will provide enough of a distraction for Rexar to slip through their watch. Rexar, Rokan, and Chen will have to wait behind while Samuro plants the explosives, but before he heads to the docks, there is a personal matter that must be settled first. Samuro's village was torn apart by a vicious wildkin called Bloodbeak the Berserker. Now, as one of the last Blade Masters to continue to wear the banner of the Burning Blade clan, Samuro's heart desires vengeance. Bloodbeak lives in the nearby hills, and before the day is at its end, Samuro's blade shall taste wildkin blood. Stalking through the hills, Samuro spotted the great beast, and with a few wide swings of his blade, brought it down. His vengeance achieved, Samuro grabs the explosives and makes for the shipyard. Sneaking into the shipyard, Samuro begins to plant the explosives. Positioned around several critical buildings such as the blacksmith, the barracks, and the docks, the resulting explosions create enough chaos for a small ship to sneak through to Theramore Isle. As they arrive at the gates to the city, Jaina is already waiting for them. Rexar, bearing Thrall's message, demands answers to why Jaina has been encroaching on the Horde's lands and threatening war. Jaina, however, is confused. She doesn't seek Thrall's death, nor does she wish to end the pact they made. Rexar mentions having to get through a large blockade just to reach Theramore, and Jaina asks him to lead her to this base so that they can clear up this entire misunderstanding. Sailing back to the mainland, both parties are surprised to find the human encampment has been burned to the ground and Naga swarming around the area. The Naga slaughtered everyone in the camp and destroyed it, and so Rexxar and Jaina begin to look for any survivors. There are no signs of any remaining living humans in the camp, and so Rexxar's group is forced to begin exploring the outer-lying wetland region. Somewhere within lies the Naga's lair, and if they had captured any prisoners, it is highly likely that they would have been brought there. If any are still alive, they can confirm whether they serve Jaina's cause or if they have gone rogue from her orders. Fighting through the Naga and the hostile wildlife, Rexxar's group tracks their base to some of the old sunken ruins nearby. The Naga, led by Lady Darkscale, had already killed what prisoners they did take by the time they've been found, and Jaina avenges them by culling the remaining serpents. As they survey the ruins, Jaina finds one dying footman who recognizes her before passing away, telling her the Admiral will be happy to see her. Realizing who it is that's leading these men, Jaina quickly teleports them all back to Theramore. Back in Theramore, Jaina begins making preparations to send Rexxar back to Thrall with a warning. As she rushes around, she realizes she's already too late as a fleet of ships arrives in the city. News had made its way back to Kultiris that Lordaeron had fallen, and Lord Admiral Dalen Proudmoore, hero of the Second War, had come in search of his daughter. Despite the Horde no longer being a threat to the Alliance, Dalen refuses to see them as anything but the monsters that killed his son and nearly burned the Eastern Kingdoms to the ground. As his forces move to grab Rexxar and his group, the three of them flee deeper into the city. Finding a civilian transport, they sneak their way around the city, leaving the safety of their disguise just long enough to open the gates blocking the canals. As they leave the Isle, they see the Admiral's army pointed towards Durotar. If Kultiris wished to attack the Orcs, then Orgrimmar would need allies to stand by their side. Rexxar's first stop in search of allies brings him to the verdant plains of Mulgore, where the Tauren that helped Thrall during the Third War have established their new home. Hoping to enlist their help, Rexxar approaches their leader, Cairn Bloodhoof, only to find him deep in despair. He sends Rexxar to return to Thrall and inform him that both he and his heart are dead. As Cairn's second-in-command, Tagar, informs him of the situation. Cairn's son, Bane, was kidnapped by the Centaur, whose cannibalistic tendencies don't bode well. With Cairn's despair, the Centaur aren't the only problems, as the nearby Harpies have also become a threat to the Tauren's Kodos. The beasts are used for everything from food and raw materials to labor, and the Harpies' poaching has further crippled their tribe. Lending his aid, Rexxar deals with the Harpies and returns to Tagar, cursing the wastefulness of the dead avians. Bovin Windtotem greets Rexxar's group as they arrive just outside of the Tauren camp, as they have been informed that he may be able to help them locate Bane. Agreeing to help, Bovin peers into the nearby well, spying on the Centaur encampment. Convinced Bane must be held somewhere inside, Rexxar's group fight their way through the camp and kill their Khan. Luckily, Bane is still alive and well, and Rexxar promises to get him back to his father safely. The Centaur block the path back out of the camp, and Bane joins the rest in fighting their way back to the rest of the Tauren. At long last, the last of the Centaur falls, and Bane is brought back to his father. Cairn's despair dissipates at the sight of his son, and he realizes that he had been a fool for giving up hope. The Horde has done much for the Tauren, and now that they need their aid, Cairn will not let Thrall down. Not only will the Tauren rally to Orgrimmar's defense, but Cairn joins up with Rexxar's party to continue with their mission. A member of the Stonemaul Ogres managed to make his way to the Darkspear village, wounded as he was, asking for help. Their new warlord killed many of their warriors in his climb to power, and Rexxar agrees to help them out. Traveling to the Dustwallow Marsh, the Ogres initially refuse Rexxar entry, but are swiftly killed. Meeting with their warlord Korgal, Rexxar asks to join the Stonemaul clan. To prove he is worthy of joining, Korgal tasks Rexxar with completing the Trial of Strength by entering a canyon called the Gauntlet and slaying the powerful monsters inside. Once his prey lies dead at his feet, Rexxar returns to Korgal to be initiated into the clan. Still, the Ogres refuse to join with the Horde again after the failure of the Second War, and by his right as a member of the clan, Rexxar challenges Korgal to the Trial of Blood. Within the arena, Rexxar claims Korgal's head, becoming the new leader of the Stonemaul, and orders them all to join in the defense of Orgrimmar. Admiral Proudmoore's forces have positioned themselves on the mainland, and Thrall intends on driving them off. To help raise the morale of the troops, he has created a banner of the Horde that he wishes to bless with shamanistic magic. As Rexxar searches for the necessary regions, he comes across a number of small dungeons bearing useful loot. These include a forgotten dungeon filled with golems, a sunken cave of hostile beasts, a temple full of greedy and power-hungry mages, and a portal leading to an arena on Outland, where a Doomguard, Dreadlord, and Succubus can be fought for glory and treasure. After retrieving the claw of a wildkin, the eye of a sea giant, and the scale of a bronze drake, Rexxar returns to Thrall so that he can complete the blessing. Thrall chooses to gift Rexxar with the banner, asking him to carry it into the battle to come, and bestowing upon him the title of Champion of the Horde. The Tauren and Ogre allies have turned the tide in the favor of the Orcs, and Rexxar rallies their combined forces against the Admiral's stronghold. Dalen intends on using this as a staging point to launch his attack against Orgrimmar, and rather than waiting for them to come, Thrall wants to take a more direct approach. Rexxar leads their forces into battle, wiping out the outer lying camps before pushing his way into the main stronghold. Even though Dalen himself joins in the fight to attempt to drive the Horde away, Rexxar's forces smash their way into the stronghold, leaving nothing but rubble and dismantling the Admiral's primary castle. In the end, Dalen's forces retreat back to Theramore Isle, and the Horde stands victorious. So long as he lives, he will never stop hunting the Orcs, and so Thrall has no choice but to lay siege to Theramore. In his heart, he hopes that Jaina managed to get to safety, as she is in no way responsible for her father's actions. Following the Lord Admiral's trail, Thrall and Rexxar lead the Horde to the coast and begin their preparations for their siege of Theramore. As they look out across the water, however, they see that Dalen has established a blockade of warships around the isle, meaning that any attacks they launch across the water will be blown to the bottom of the ocean. As Thrall and Rexxar plan their next moves, Jaina teleports to meet with the two of them and beg for their mercy. She has had no part in any of her father's plans, and that she wishes that none of this had ever happened to begin with. Although Thrall and Jaina fought and bled together against the Legion, her father's actions threaten the security of the Horde, and so he cannot simply stand by. She agrees not to get in their way, but asks that Thrall not harm the people of Theramore, as although Dalen may use their forces against them, her people are innocent. As she leaves, Jaina mentions a nearby goblin shipyard that may be able to help them breach the blockade. Rexxar and his party make landfall on a small island just off the coast where the Kultiran fleet has established their primary base. Together they manage to carve their path through the human soldiers, dismantling the base and freeing the goblin shipyard that is set up nearby. Purchasing a number of warships of their own, as well as a few transport ships, Rexxar and his party moves between each of the remaining islands in the area, slaughtering the Kultirans on land while their warships scour the seas and fight against the Kultiran fleet. Once the last of the human warships has been blown apart, Thrall rallies his forces into their transport ships and leads them to Theramore Isle. When they arrive, they find the humans have deeply fortified the isle, and Thrall calls for his warriors to force their way through and storm the citadel. Cairn, along with Chen and Rokan, look to Rexxar to lead them into the battle to come. The soldiers of the Horde throw themselves against the Kultiran resistance, trying to push their way deeper into Theramore Isle, while Rexxar joins the fray, cleaving through soldiers and bringing down their defensive towers. Him and his group move throughout the streets, helping out each of the invasion routes fight through Dalen's forces, all while avoiding any harm to the civilians of Theramore. As they confront Dalen himself, the Lord Admiral admitted that he had expected the Orcs to have turned on each other by now, but Thrall spits back that his horde is not the same one from the Second War. They have paid for their past sins with blood, but in Dalen's eyes, the Orcs can never atone for all the innocents they slaughtered. He vows that he will never stop hunting them, cursing the Orcs until Rexxar brings down his axe and silences the Lord Admiral forevermore. As her father falls, Jaina rushes to his side, crying over him. Rexxar comforts her, telling her that above all else, her father was a fierce warrior up until the bitter end. With no other quarrels, the Orcs leave Theramore in peace and return to Durotar. As Thrall leads his forces back to their new home, he turns to Rexxar and offers him a place among them. Rexxar, however, refuses to make his home in Orgrimmar, for he is one of the Mok'Nathal, and as such his place is among the beasts and wilderness of the land. Yet as he leaves, he reassures Thrall that should they ever have need of him, he will always be a member of the Horde. The Kultiran fleet made their way back to their home, telling their people of the events that transpired. They cried out for vengeance, but this only strained their relationship with what remained of the Alliance. Furious, Kultiras would isolate themselves from their former allies and harbor a hatred of the one who betrayed their people. Their party now broken, Cairn returned to his people in Mulgore, while Rokan returned with Thrall to Orgrimmar, remaining loyal to his service. Chen remained for a time in Orgrimmar, continuing to perfect his brews before he would leave again to continue his journeys. Along with Misha, Rexar returned to the wilderness of Kalimdor, traveling among the savage lands for years to come.